Right now, someone around you might be making you doubt your own memory, your feelings, and your sanity, and doing it so skillfully that you start to think, the problem is me. This is called gaslighting, and it's one of the most subtle forms of psychological manipulation because the victim usually doesn't realize what's happening until they're completely disoriented. Have you ever noticed that after a conversation with a specific person, you feel guilty, confused, or as if you've gone off the rails, even though you entered the conversation with a clear position? Or do you remember the situation as it happened, only to be told you made it all up, and you begin to distrust yourself? This isn't a coincidence or your oversensitivity. It's a specific tool the person around you is using. In this video, I'll break down 5 specific phrases gaslighters use most often. You'll hear them and recognize them immediately, because you've likely heard them before. And most importantly, you'll understand why these words have such a powerful effect on you. You're overreacting. This is perhaps the most common phrase in a gaslighter's arsenal. It works without fail because it hits you where you're most vulnerable, your emotional response. You come to them with a real problem, with real pain or resentment, and in response, you don't get a real conversation, but an assessment of your behavior. The problem itself instantly disappears from view. A person tells their partner that their words were hurtful, and in response hears that they are making a mountain out of a molehill and always dramatizing. And as a result, instead of discussing the situation, they begin to justify their emotions. Psychologically, it works like this. When you're told your reaction is inappropriate, you shift your focus from the external problem to the internal one. You start thinking not, what did he do, but what's wrong with me? The gaslighter successfully shifts the focus and leaves the situation without a single uncomfortable question. This didn't happen. You made it all up. This is a direct attack on your memory. The gaslighter denies facts you clearly remember, words, events, agreements. And they do so with such certainty that you begin to doubt. What if I really did mix something up? Over time, this doubt becomes a habit, and the person stops trusting their own memories. One of the partners remembers a conversation in which they agreed to spend the weekend together, but the other says with absolute certainty that such a conversation never took place. And the first one starts recording everything on a voice recorder because he no longer believes himself. The fact is that human memory is inherently non-linear and susceptible to influence. The brain easily begins to edit memories if an authority figure or loved one insists that things were different. Gaslighters know this and deliberately exploit it. You brought me to this yourself. This phrase is a classic deflection. No matter what the gaslighter does, yell at you, say something derogatory, be cruel, they immediately attribute their behavior to your actions. You're to blame for their actions. You provoked them. They were simply reacting. This logic completely absolves them of responsibility and places it on you. After a sudden and hurtful breakdown, a person hears not an apology, but an explanation that he or she forced their partner to act this way with their own behavior. And over time, they truly begin to feel guilty about their partner's reactions. Psychologically, this is called shifting responsibility or externalizing blame. When you're constantly told that your actions are causing someone else's destructive behavior, you begin to unconsciously adapt, trying not to provoke, walking on eggshells, and controlling every word. That's the goal. Everyone else agrees with me, only you don't think so. A gaslighter often attracts a third party. people real or imagined who supposedly share their point of view. This creates a feeling of isolation. Everyone around you sees the situation differently than you. You're alone, which means you're probably wrong. This phrase is especially effective when spoken confidently and without the opportunity to verify the words. The person is told that their colleagues, friends, or even relatives also consider their reaction inadequate, even though, in fact, the gaslighter has never spoken to anyone, but is simply using this argument as pressure. This exploits one of the most basic social instincts, the need to belong. When we're told we're the only ones who think differently, our brain automatically starts signaling, "Something's wrong with me." This pressure works even when we rationally understand that we might be being deceived. This phrase shuts down any conversation before it even begins. It doesn't just attack your reaction, it attacks the very possibility of dialogue. You try to raise an important topic, and in response, you receive the verdict: you're the problem. That's precisely why a normal conversation never happens. Not because the gaslighter is evading the topic, but because you're impossible. Every time a person tries to talk about something important, the conversation ends the same way, with the accusation that he is too emotional and it is impossible to have a normal dialogue with him. And gradually, he simply stops trying. Learned helplessness is at work here, a psychological mechanism whereby a person stops trying because they're convinced they'll get nowhere. This is precisely what the gaslighter wants, to shut you up and stop demanding explanations. All 5 phrases work in the same way. They shift attention from the gaslighter's actions to your personality, your memory, or your emotions. Instead of discussing what happened, you begin to defend your right to your own perception of reality. Over time, this drains, disorients, and destroys self-confidence. There's only one practical piece of advice, but it works. Start recording. Not to prove anything to the other person, but for yourself. Write down conversations in notes immediately afterward. What was said, how you felt, what offended you. This creates a point of support that the gaslighter can't destroy with words. When you see what you wrote in your own handwriting, it's harder to convince yourself that nothing happened. If this video hit the nail on the head, it means the topic isn't abstract for you. Subscribe, because the next video will be about how to identify a toxic person in your life. Not just a partner, but also a friend, colleague, or relative, by specific behavioral signs that are easy to miss at first.